Here on the show, one of the most important things that we always talk about, and if you've been a long-time viewer of the show, then you will know exactly what it is as soon as I start to talk about it. We frequently touch on this every week. There's a common theme with a lot of our episodes. What is this common theme? It is that when we are engaging with life, folks, we want to engage with life with the most minimal amount of distortion in our worldview as possible. Now that sounds like a mouthful. Let me repeat that. When we engage with life, we want to have the most minimal amount of distortion in our worldview as possible. What is distortion? Distortion is nothing other than inaccuracies with regards to the facts of reality. That's all distortion is. Distortion is inaccuracies as they relate to the facts of reality. So if you don't understand, let me give you a very basic example. We've talked about this before. A very basic fact of reality is gravity. Now everybody understands. Maybe they don't understand the very complex underlying physics behind gravity, but everyone practically understands what gravity means. If I lift up, for example, if I lift up this tissue and I release my grip of the tissue, what is going to happen to the tissue? Is it going to float in the air or is it going to fall to the ground? Let's run the experiment. Tissue falls to the ground. Gravity. It actually fell on my knee. But you get the point. So, a fact of reality, we could say, is gravity. Gravity is a fact of our reality. So when I lift the tissue up and I release my grip of the tissue falls. Now, if I were to get a ladder and climb up to the top of the roof of my house, and let's say I stand on the edge of my house, on the roof of my house. So I'm standing on the edge of the roof. Now let's imagine I don't believe that gravity is real. So let's imagine I have a distorted view of what gravity is. What does a distorted view mean? It means an inaccurate view of what gravity actually is. An inaccurate understanding of what it is. So let's imagine I have a distorted view of what gravity is. And let's imagine I don't believe in gravity. Let's imagine that in my own head, I think that science is completely corrupt. Science is a figment of our imagination. It's not real. And that gravity, by extension, isn't real. It's a made-up concept. Let's imagine that's what my worldview is. So if that's my worldview, and I think gravity isn't real, and I'm on the edge of my roof of my house, and I think to myself, this gravity nonsense, that's what it is. It's nonsense. Why the fuck would I use the ladder? Why would I use the ladder to get back down onto solid ground again? No, fuck the ladder. I'm going to jump off the roof because gravity isn't real. And so when I jump off the roof, I will float. Let's imagine that's my worldview. Now, what's going to happen, folks? If I have this distorted understanding about the facts of reality, in other words, put differently, if I have some inaccuracies in my understanding of the facts of reality, and I'm on the roof of my house, and I'm about to jump off the roof, thinking that gravity is a load of bollocks, and that I'm going to float. back down to solid ground again, what's going to happen, folks? Well, I'm going to jump off the roof. And one of two things are going to happen. The first thing that might happen is I die. So I incur so much tissue damage that I die. Okay. Here's the second thing that might happen. I may not die, but I may sustain such crippling, disabling injuries that I'm now effectively a cabbage. We've talked about cabbages before, folks. You know cabbages? Have you ever had a cabbage? Have you ever seen a cabbage out in the field? A cabbage just is there. It doesn't move. It's rooted to the ground. It has no ability to move. There's no locomotion when it comes to a cabbage. And so if I decide that gravity is a bunch of bollocks, and I jump off my roof of my 2 or 3 story house, I'm either going to die or I will become a cabbage, also known as a vegetable. So I'll sustain such disabling injuries that I'm permanently handicapped physically. All right. So, this is a very basic example, folks, but you can see the problem with having distortion in your worldview. If you have a distorted understanding of gravity and the basic principles of what that means, then you are going to do stupid things like jump off the roof of your house. Because you think the world operates differently to how it has been presented to you through the facts. And so what do you end up making? What do you make? Mistakes. When you have a lot of distortion in your worldview, you make mistakes. In our example, the mistake that you're making is you think gravity isn't real. So you think you can float from the roof of your house down to the ground. When you jump off the roof of your house, you're all of a sudden in agonizing pain or you are dead. The distorted understanding of the facts of reality has led you to making a mistake. You jump off the roof. Of course you shouldn't jump off the roof. You should use the fucking ladder. That's what the ladder was invented for. It's invented so that you don't have to jump off the roof. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Only someone who didn't understand the facts of reality would make such a foolish decision. Only someone who has such a distorted worldview would commit such a mistake. And so, folks, this is why when we engage with life, we don't want to have a whole bunch of distortion in our worldview. In other words, we don't want to have a whole bunch of inaccuracies about how the world works. Because if we have inaccurate information about how the world works, we make mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes can be very costly. They could cost you your life. They could cost you a whole bunch of money. They could cost you a whole bunch of embarrassment. Who knows? But sometimes mistakes can be very costly. And so, this is a recurrent theme throughout any of our episodes, ever since we've started the channel. This idea of distortion. It's extremely important, folks, that we are always seeking new information and feedback. Feedback or new information, we could sort of use these terms interchangeably. Feedback / new information is the way in which we can update our biological computer. What's our biological computer? Our brain. We need new information in the form of feedback, we could say, because new information is feedback. They are basically synonyms. We need feedback and new information to ensure that we are updating our biological computer so that we are constantly minimizing the amount of distortion in our worldview. How do you think you get rid of distortion, folks? How do you think you get rid of inaccuracies in your worldview? New information. You need new information. That's how you minimize the amount of distortion in your worldview. How is it that we understand that jumping off a roof isn't a good idea? Well, we have information that tells us gravity is a real thing. Jumping off the roof is not a good idea because you're going to sustain an injury or kill yourself. Use the ladder. So we have information about gravity. We have information about the nature of a roof. We have information about what distance from the ground means. We have information about a ladder and what it represents. We bring all of this information together, and so we come to an accurate decision. The accurate decision being, or the accurate conclusion being, yes, I'm on the roof of a house, I'm going to use the ladder to safely get my way back to ground level again. Information. We need new information to constantly update our brain, to make sure that we don't have outdated information that could be creating distortion in our worldview. For example, let's use another example. If I want to, I don't know, if I want to call my mother, if I want to, better still, if I want to make contact with my mother, let's say I have something that I want to talk with my mother about. Well, if I haven't updated my brain with the current environment in which we live and the current technology that I have at my disposal, if I wasn't aware of mobile phones, of email, and all of these things, then you know what I would be doing? I would be writing a letter and sending it to my mother in the post. Because I have a distorted understanding of how it is that I can actually make contact with someone. In other words, I don't have information at my disposal that actually would inform me that there's a more efficient way to get in touch with my mother. And so, now in 2026, I understand that I don't have to write a letter and send it to my mother. All I have to do is pick up my phone and call her. That's it. How do I know to do this? New information. I have become knowledgeable about how I can use technology to save me time. So I don't have to sit down and write out a letter and put it in an envelope and go to the post office and post it and, wait for 3 days until, it gets sent to her and then she sends me a reply via another letter. I don't have to do this. That's outdated information. That's an outdated way of making contact with someone. Sure, I could do it if I wanted, but it's inefficient. It's outdated. I have other tools at my disposal that I can use to help me get in contact with my mother quicker, with less hassle, to save me time. New information. I've educated myself and acquired new information, and now I know, yes, if I want to call my mother or get in contact with my mother, all I have to do is pick up the phone and send a message, a text message, or ring her. Job done. I don't have to go and write a fucking letter and put it in the post with Royal Mail. I don't have to do that. And so, folks, by me updating the system, by me educating myself and bringing new information into my worldview, into my understanding of the world, what have I just done? I've reduced the amount of distortion. Because if I didn't have this information about modern day technology, I would have a distorted understanding of how it is that you have to go about making contact with someone. I would be thinking, oh, well, I'm just going to have to go get a letter written and put it in the post. No! If I said that to someone, the person would look at me and say, what do you mean you have to send a letter? You can just send them an email, send them a text message, call them, send them a message on social media. Huh? What? Call them or send a message or an email? Social media? If I don't have that information at my disposal, I'm now operating under some degree of distortion. And so what ends up happening? I invest time, energy, and attention in an inefficient process that requires me to wait days until I would actually get a response from my mother. That's a distorted understanding of how the world currently works. So how do I limit that distortion? New information. I need to educate myself about the technology that I have at my disposal. I don't need to use letters anymore. I can use a phone or use email. Now I've updated the system. And so I have de-distorted the system somewhat. I've made this entire process more efficient. I don't have to spend as much time. And so I've now got a more accurate understanding about the facts of reality. The facts of reality are, no, your only option isn't to send a letter. You have other options that are quicker and easier. Great. New information. Makes my life better. Updates the system. The biological computer, which is your brain, now understands that there's a better way to do things. In other words, you have reduced the level of distortion. In other words, you've reduced the degree or the number of inaccuracies that you have about how you think the world works.